I used to think that hiding parts of myself made me stronger. That if I could just lock away the side of me that didn't fit the image everyone expected, I'd finally be accepted. Growing up, I learned quickly that people didn't like different. They liked simple, predictable, safe. And I tried to be all those things. I tried to be the version of me that would never raise eyebrows, never make anyone uncomfortable, never make my father sigh or my friends laugh behind my back. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone pretending to exist, not someone truly living. It wasn't about clothes, or style, or even gender at first. It was about feeling like I was trapped inside a character written by someone else. A script I never agreed to follow. It started small, like it always does. A borrowed shirt from my sister when no one was home. A quiet moment in front of the mirror, trying to understand why it made me feel more at peace than anything else in my life. I wasn't trying to look pretty, or different, or anyone else. I was trying to see me. And for the first time, the reflection didn't fight back. It didn't look wrong. It just looked honest. But then came the fear. The panic that followed that moment of calm. I shoved everything back into the closet, wiped away the traces, and promised myself I'd never do it again. But promises like that are made out of fear, not truth. And truth has a way of finding you when you least expect it. I remember one night it was late, around 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I walked into the bathroom, turned on the small yellow light, and stared at myself. I didn't recognize the person looking back. I was tired of pretending, of hiding behind layers of expectation. So I reached into the drawer, took out an old brush, and started brushing my hair. Slowly, quietly, like it was a secret conversation between me and the mirror. It wasn't about vanity. It was about comfort. About seeing softness where I'd been told to show strength. I whispered to my reflection, maybe this is who I am. And for the first time, I didn't correct myself. The next morning, I felt the usual guilt. The heavy kind that makes your chest tight. I went through my day, pretending like nothing had happened. But something had changed inside me. It wasn't a switch flipping, it was a slow, steady awakening. Like realizing you've been walking uphill for years and suddenly finding flat ground. It took me months before I dared to open up to anyone. My best friend, Lena, was the first. We'd been close since school. She was the only one who ever saw through my armor. One night, while we were talking in her living room, I told her. Not everything, just enough. I said, sometimes I feel more like myself when I'm not acting so masculine. She looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, you don't have to act for me. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until that moment. She smiled, got up, and came back with a small box. Inside was a bracelet, thin, silver, with a tiny charm. She said, try this. It's not about fashion. It's about being free. That gesture, so small, so human, broke something open in me. Over the next few weeks, she became my safe place. We talked about identity, fear, courage. She helped me see that embracing my softer side didn't make me weak, it made me whole. Sometimes we'd sit together, trying different looks, not to impress anyone, but to explore what made me feel right inside. The world outside her apartment was still heavy with judgment, but in that room, I could breathe. One afternoon, my sister found out. I'd left a bag in the hallway, and inside were a few things that weren't exactly typical for me. When she confronted me, I froze. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd faint. She didn't yell. She just said, why didn't you tell me? I couldn't answer. I expected her to laugh, or worse, to be disgusted. Instead, she hugged me. You've always been my brother, but if this makes you happy, that's what matters. That moment shattered years of fear. Still, I knew acceptance wasn't universal. When my father found out, it didn't go well. He didn't understand. He thought it was rebellion, confusion, or weakness. We argued, cried, shouted. For weeks, he wouldn't look me in the eye. But I didn't run this time. I didn't hide. I stood my ground, even when my voice trembled. I told him, I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I want to live honestly. And slowly, over time, He started to see that I wasn't changing into someone else, I was becoming who I really was. There were days I questioned everything. Days I wished I could just erase the part of me that made life complicated. But then I'd wake up, put on something that felt right, look in the mirror, and remember that peace I'd once found in silence. It wasn't about being male or female. It was about being whole. About balancing the strength I was taught to show with the softness I was born to feel. The turning point came one night at a family dinner. I'd decided to stop hiding. Nothing dramatic, just a softer shirt, lighter tone, a bit of confidence that came from finally being aligned with myself. The table went quiet when I walked in. My father's eyes narrowed, my uncle whispered something, but I kept walking. My mother stood up, came over, and fixed the collar of my shirt. "You look nice," she said. And that was it. No explosion, no rejection. Just quiet acceptance. After that night, things began to shift. My friends started seeing me not as someone different, but as someone finally comfortable in their own skin. The fear that once ruled my life started fading. In its place came something I never thought I'd feel: pride. Not arrogance, but pride in surviving my own doubt. I began speaking openly about it, first to a few close people, then on social media, cautiously. I didn't use labels. I just talked about learning to accept parts of myself I'd once buried. And the messages started coming from strangers, from people who felt the same way, people who said they finally felt seen. That's when I realized my story wasn't just about me. It was about anyone who's ever been told to hide the parts of themselves that don't fit the world's definition of normal. There were still moments of fear, of course. There always will be. But every time I felt doubt creeping in, I remembered that quiet reflection in the bathroom mirror. That whisper of truth that started it all. The courage to look at myself and not flinch. That's what real transformation is: not the clothes, not the name, but the ability to face your reflection and finally say, "This is me." One day, months later, my father came to my room. He sat on the edge of my bed, silent for a while. Then he said, "You know, your mother told me you looked happier lately. She's right. I see it too." I didn't know what to say. Then he added, "I might not understand everything, but I want to." That was the moment I realized acceptance doesn't always come instantly. Sometimes it comes quietly, in pieces, one understanding at a time. Now, when I look back, I don't see shame or confusion. I see courage. I see a person who stopped living in fear and started living in truth. I used to think embracing my sissy side, as people call it, was something to hide, something that would make life harder. But it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. Not because it changed how others saw me, but because it changed how I saw myself. I stopped trying to be who I thought I should be, and started being who I already was. These days, I walk with a kind of calm I never knew before. When people ask me what changed, I tell them the truth. Nothing, really. I just stopped fighting myself. I stopped apologizing for feeling deeply, for caring about things others might laugh at, for wanting beauty and softness in a world obsessed with strength and noise. I learned that being true doesn't mean fitting in, it means standing out with grace. And if my story can reach even one person hiding behind their own fear, I hope they hear this. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You just have to stop running from yourself. The world may not understand right away. People may talk, they may judge. But there's a quiet kind of freedom waiting for you on the other side of honesty. It's worth every tear, every awkward moment, every hard conversation. I used to wake up dreading the day. Now, I wake up curious. Curious about who I'll become, how much more of myself I can uncover, how many lives I can touch by simply existing as me. That's the gift of embracing what once scared you. It gives you your life back. I still remember that first night, brushing my hair under the soft bathroom light. I didn't know it then, but that was the first step toward freedom. Toward peace. Toward love, not from others, but from myself. If I could go back and talk to that scared version of me, I'd tell him, "You're not broken. You're becoming." So yes, I embraced my sissy side. And it was the best decision ever because it wasn't about changing who I was. It was about finally coming home. After that moment of peace, life didn't magically become easy. The world doesn't always adjust just because you've found your truth. There were whispers at work, sideways glances from people who used to greet me with wide smiles. My boss, who once called me one of the most dependable guys on the team, suddenly didn't know how to refer to me. I could see the confusion behind his eyes every time he started a sentence. Hey man, hey, he'd stop, unsure what word to use. I didn't blame him. He wasn't cruel, he just didn't understand. And maybe that was okay. Understanding takes time. But those moments still hurt. It's strange how something as simple as authenticity can make people uncomfortable. I'd walk down the hallway, shoulders straight, pretending not to notice the tiny pauses in conversation when I passed. Yet, underneath that tension, I felt something stronger than fear relief. Because no matter how people reacted, at least they were reacting to me, not to the mask I'd been wearing all my life. One evening, after a long day of work, I sat by my window, city lights reflecting in the glass. The air smelled like rain, soft and heavy. I thought about how far I'd come. About the boy who once hid in the dark, terrified of being seen. About the person I'd grown into, not perfect, but honest. Lena called me just then. She said, "You sound quiet tonight." I told her I was thinking. She laughed. "You're always thinking. Try feeling instead." And she was right. So I turned off the light, leaned my head against the window, and let myself feel everything: pride, sadness, freedom, exhaustion. All of it was part of the same truth. My transformation wasn't about becoming someone new, it was about unlearning everything I was taught to be. That's the hardest part, not the change itself, but the letting go. Letting go of what people expect. Letting go of the fear of disappointing them. Letting go of the belief that your worth depends on fitting in. A few weeks later, my company hosted a small event, a dinner to celebrate a successful project. I almost didn't go. The thought of being around everyone again, facing the unspoken curiosity, made me anxious. But Lena convinced me. "You've worked too hard to hide," she said. "Show up as you." I remember standing in front of the mirror that evening. The city lights flickered through my window, painting gold streaks across my face. I chose an outfit that felt like balance: neat, gentle, professional, but still me. I took a deep breath and said softly, "You belong here." Walking into that restaurant was one of the hardest things I've ever done. For the first few minutes, people didn't know what to say. The room felt tight. Then one of my co-workers, a quiet man named Ryan, came up and said, "Hey, you look happy. It suits you." That broke the ice. By the end of the night, laughter filled the room like it used to. No one talked about my clothes. No one whispered. It was just life again. And maybe that's what I'd been chasing all along: normal moments that didn't need explaining. Not every day was like that, of course. Some days I felt lost, caught between courage and doubt. The comments online weren't always kind when I started sharing my story publicly. But I learned something important: the negativity wasn't really about me. It was about people wrestling with their own discomfort. I stopped taking it personally. Instead, I focused on the messages from those who found hope in my words. People who said they finally dared to speak their truth because they saw me do it first. That kept me going. Months passed, and something beautiful happened. My relationship with my father slowly began to heal. One Sunday morning, he asked me to help him in the garden. We didn't talk much at first, just worked side by side. Then he said, "You seem lighter now. Happier." I smiled, unsure what to say. He looked at me, his eyes softer than I'd seen in years. "I guess I'm still learning how to understand," he said quietly. "But I see how brave you've been." My throat tightened. It was the closest thing to acceptance I could have asked for. That night, I cried. Not from sadness, but from the kind of relief that feels like sunlight breaking through after years of rain. I realized that love isn't always loud or perfect. Sometimes it's awkward, clumsy, slow to arrive, but when it does, it's real. There's a moment I'll never forget. A few months later, I gave a small talk at a local community event about identity and authenticity. I stood there, heart pounding, looking out at a room full of faces, some curious, some skeptical, some full of quiet hope. I started by saying, "For years, I tried to be what the world wanted. And all it gave me was emptiness. It wasn't until I embraced what I was afraid of that I finally felt whole. When I finished, a teenager came up to me, tears in his eyes. He said, "I thought I was the only one." I hugged him and whispered, "You're never alone. You just haven't met your people yet." That's when it truly sank in. The journey wasn't just mine. It was shared by countless others too afraid to take the first step. By telling my story, I gave them permission to begin theirs. These days, when I wake up, I don't feel the heaviness I used to. My reflection doesn't scare me anymore. The clothes I wear, the way I move, the softness I carry, it's all part of me now. I stopped labeling it, stopped apologizing for it. I simply live. And that's something I never thought I'd be able to say. Sometimes, I go back to that same bathroom where it all began. The mirror hasn't changed, but I have. I trace my fingers along the edge of the sink and smile at my reflection. "We made it," I whisper. And I mean it. I know not everyone will understand my story. Some will hear Sissy and think weakness. But I've learned that true strength doesn't come from pretending to be invincible, it comes from embracing every part of who you are, even the parts others mock or misunderstand. That's courage. That's freedom. When people ask if I'd do it all again, if I'd face the fear, the rejection, the loneliness, I don't hesitate. I'd do it 1,000 times over. Because now, I'm living honestly. I laugh louder. I love deeper. I walk taller. I found peace not by becoming someone else, but by coming home to myself. And maybe that's what I hope people take from my story, that being true to yourself isn't about defying the world. It's about embracing it on your own terms. It's about giving yourself the kindness you've always given others. So yes, I embraced my sissy side, the softness, the emotion, the beauty, the vulnerability, and it turned out to be my greatest strength. It taught me how to live without fear, how to love without shame, and how to exist without apology. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: sometimes, the parts of us we hide are the very things that can set us free. A year later, I found myself standing in front of a camera, about to record a video that would change everything. It wasn't meant to go viral. I just wanted to really speak about what I'd been through, about how hard it was to live in silence and how freeing it felt to finally stop pretending. I remember sitting in my small living room, lights dimmed, the faint hum of the city outside my window. I hit record, took a breath, and said, "Hi. My name's Alex." And for most of my life, I thought being myself was something I had to hide. I didn't script it. I just talked. About the fear, the nights of crying quietly, the first time I looked in the mirror and didn't hate what I saw. About how strange it felt to be both terrified and relieved at the same time. About how acceptance doesn't come all at once, it comes in moments, in glances, in the small, quiet decisions to choose honesty over fear. I thought maybe a few people would watch it. But by the next morning, my phone was filled with notifications. Messages from strangers. Stories from people who had lived in the same kind of silence. Some were angry, sure, but most were kind. The comments that stuck with me weren't the dramatic ones. They were the quiet ones. People saying things like, "I finally feel seen," or "I didn't know anyone else felt this way." That's when I realized the power of truth. It spreads. It gives others permission to breathe again. But with visibility came new challenges. My story wasn't just mine anymore. People had opinions, assumptions, labels they wanted to stick on me. Some said I was brave. Others said I was confused. But I learned to stop chasing everyone's approval. I didn't need to fit into their categories. I just needed to keep living honestly. One day, I got an email from a small documentary filmmaker. She said she'd seen my video and wanted to meet. Her message was simple: your story could help people understand what courage really looks like. My first reaction was fear. Putting my life out there again, on camera, for the world to dissect it felt too much. But Lena told me something that pushed me forward. She said, "Alex, you've already come this far. Maybe it's time to stop surviving your story and start sharing it." So I agreed. We filmed over several weeks. The first day was the hardest. Sitting under bright studio lights, microphones everywhere, I felt exposed in a way I never had before. But the director, Mia, had this calm energy about her. She didn't push me to perform. She just let me be. She asked questions that went beyond what I looked like or how I dressed. She asked about the fear, the childhood dreams, the guilt, the little victories no one ever saw. At one point, I remember her asking, "When did you stop being afraid of being called a sissy?" I thought for a moment and said, "When I realized it wasn't an insult anymore. It was a mirror and I finally liked what I saw in it." When the documentary came out, I expected backlash. Instead, something beautiful happened. People started writing letters, real letters, not just comments. Some from parents who finally understood their kids. Some from people in small towns who said they finally had hope. One letter stood out. It was from a man in his 50s who wrote, "I wish I had your courage when I was your age. You've helped me forgive myself." That line broke me in the best way possible. Because for so long, I thought my story was about shame. But it turned out to be about healing. And healing has a strange rhythm. Some days it feels like laughter, others like quiet tears. But it's always progress. My family, too, began to heal with me. My father, who once struggled the most, became my biggest supporter. He started watching the interviews, reading the comments, and one evening, he turned to me and said, "You've taught me more about strength than anyone else ever could." I'll never forget those words. Life didn't become perfect after that. There were still awkward stares, still moments of judgment, but they didn't carry the same weight anymore. The difference was, I knew who I was. I didn't need anyone else to confirm it. I walked differently, talked differently. Not out of defiance but out of peace. One night, I was invited to speak at a youth center. The room was full of nervous faces, kids who looked like I once did, terrified to speak their truth. I told them the story of the mirror, of Lena, of my father. I told them how every step forward felt like stepping into light, even when it was scary. At the end, a young girl stood up and asked, "How do you stay brave when everyone tells you you're wrong?" I smiled and said, "You remember that bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about choosing to keep going even when you are." After the talk, that same girl came up to me and said, "I wore what I wanted today because I saw your video." And no one laughed. I hugged her, trying not to cry. That's when I understood this wasn't just about my journey anymore. It was about passing on courage. There's a moment each morning now, when I stand in front of the mirror and just look at myself. No makeup, no styling, no effort to fit any label. Just me, raw and real. And every day, I feel that same quiet warmth I felt years ago in that yellow-lit bathroom. It's a reminder that I made it. That the version of me who once trembled at the thought of being seen now shines without apology. Sometimes, people still call me names online. Sissy comes up more often than you'd think. But now, I smile when I see it. Because to me, that word doesn't mean weak anymore. It means free. It means soft enough to feel deeply, strong enough to show it, brave enough to own it. And that's the message I hope sticks, that being gentle, emotional, expressive isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to celebrate. The world tries to tell us that strength looks like silence, that softness is a flaw. But I've learned the opposite. True strength is tenderness. Real courage is vulnerability. If I could go back in time, to that scared version of me brushing his hair in secret, I wouldn't tell him to be tougher. I'd tell him to be kinder to himself. Because that's where it all begins. Self-kindness is the first act of rebellion against a world that wants you to fit in. Now, when I meet new people and they ask about my journey, I tell them, it wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who I was before the world told me to forget. And that's the truth of it. I embraced my sissy side, the softness, the emotion, the parts one once thought were wrong, and it gave me my life back. It gave me purpose. It gave me love. If someone watching this right now feels that same confusion, that same fear I once did, I want them to know you are not broken. You are just waiting to meet the version of yourself that's been there all along, asking to be seen. Listen to that voice. It's not weakness. It's freedom calling. Because sometimes, the best decision you'll ever make is to stop pretending and start becoming. After the documentary aired and my story spread, life began to shift in ways I never could have imagined. People started reaching out from all over, messages from kids in small towns, adults in offices who'd been hiding who they were for decades, parents desperate to understand their own children. Every story I received reminded me that what I thought was a small, personal journey was part of something much bigger. And that realization both humbled me and terrified me. I was suddenly a voice for people I'd never met, people who were counting on me to be brave. One afternoon, I received an invitation to speak at a conference focused on youth mental health and identity. Standing backstage, I felt the familiar flutter of nerves. Years ago, I'd never imagined that I'd stand in front of hundreds of people, talking about something so personal. My reflection in the mirrored wall gave me a small smile, a reassurance I didn't know I needed. I reminded myself, this isn't about perfection. It's about honesty. When I walked out onto the stage, the applause was louder than I expected. Faces blurred together, but I could feel their attention, the weight of their curiosity, the hunger for truth. I took a deep breath and started talking. I told them about the nights I hid in my room, about the mirror that became my first friend, about the fear, the shame, and finally, the courage it took to live openly. I spoke about the softness I once thought was a flaw, and how embracing it made me stronger, happier, more complete. Halfway through, I noticed a young man in the front row wiping his eyes. He looked so familiar, not in person, but in emotion. That's the thing about stories, they reflect ourselves back to us. I finished speaking, stepped down from the podium, and people lined up to share their experiences. They told me how seeing someone embrace their true self gave them permission to do the same. One young woman whispered, "I finally wore a skirt to school today. I was scared, but seeing you made it feel okay." Her courage made me choke back tears. Backstage, Lena found me. She gave me that same reassuring smile she always did and said, "See? You're helping people just by being you." I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep in my chest. This was more than just self-discovery. It was connection. It was showing the world that embracing your whole self isn't just acceptable, it's necessary. Even at home, life felt lighter. My father, once so unsure, now asks for my advice on small things, from what shirt to wear to how to handle criticism. He's learning alongside me. My sister, of course, remains a steadfast ally. And Lena? Well, she's the constant reminder that courage isn't always solitary, sometimes it's shared. I began mentoring others online, responding to messages, sharing stories of small victories and struggles alike. I don't claim to have all the answers. There's no perfect formula for bravery, and acceptance isn't instantaneous. But every time someone tells me they've finally accepted themselves, or stood up for who they are, I realize the ripple effect of embracing who I am. Some days are still hard. Judgment exists, and not everyone is kind. Sometimes I see the headlines, the debates, the voices that don't understand, and I feel a pang of that old fear. But it's always fleeting now. Because even in the toughest moments, I have a foundation I never had before: self-respect, honesty, and the quiet knowledge that I am enough exactly as I am. I've also learned to enjoy the small things, simple moments that once felt impossible. Standing in front of a mirror in the morning, adjusting my hair, feeling the fabric of my clothes against my skin, and thinking, I like this. I like me. Walking outside and not shrinking from the eyes of strangers, but walking with a quiet pride that comes from knowing you are aligned with yourself. Laughing freely with friends who see you for who you truly are. Watching Lena smile, knowing she has seen every version of me and loved me anyway. One evening, my father and I went for a walk. The city was quiet, the streetlights casting a soft glow. He asked, "Do you ever regret any of this?" I thought about the years of hiding, the fear, the doubt, and shook my head. "Not for a second," I said. "All of it led me here. To who I am, and to the people I've met along the way." He nodded, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace with him, with myself, with everything. Now, whenever I talk to people, I tell them the same thing: embracing who you are isn't a single moment. It's a collection of choices, some small, some monumental, that slowly teach you courage, compassion, and resilience. It's about learning to treat yourself with the kindness you've always given to others. It's about showing up, even when it's scary, and discovering that your life can be richer, fuller, and more joyful than you ever imagined. Looking back, I realized that embracing my sissy side wasn't about clothes, or labels, or what anyone else thought. It was about reclaiming myself, piece by piece. It was about understanding that the parts of me I once feared are the parts that make me strong, empathetic, and alive. And every day since has been a gift, a reminder that authenticity is the greatest freedom anyone can have. I can honestly say now that the best decision I ever made was to stop hiding, to embrace all the parts of me, and to live openly and fully. And if sharing this story helps even one person take their first step toward self-acceptance, then every fear, every tear, every moment of doubt was worth it. Because when you stop running from yourself, when you finally allow your true reflection to shine, you discover something remarkable. Life isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving. And that is a lesson I'll carry with me, always. After that, life began to settle into a rhythm I'd never thought possible. I woke up each morning with a sense of anticipation instead of dread, curious about how the day would unfold rather than anxious about hiding. The mirror no longer reflected fear or doubt, it reflected someone I recognized and finally felt proud of. I would run my fingers through my hair, tug at a soft sweater, and smile at the quiet courage it took to get there. Work became a different kind of challenge. I learned to navigate the professional world as my authentic self, with gentleness and grace that once would have been hidden. Some co-workers were slow to adjust, but most responded with simple human kindness once they saw that I was no different in skill or dedication, just different in honesty. Occasionally, someone would make a passing remark, a faint snicker, or a curious glance, and I realized that wasn't my burden to carry. I had already carried the heaviest load for years myself. I also noticed how my own relationships shifted. Friendships became deeper, more genuine. People who saw me hiding or pretending gradually made space for the real me, and those who didn't, I let go. It was a slow culling, but a necessary one. And in the space that opened up, I found people who didn't just accept me, they celebrated the courage it took to be me. Lena remained my anchor, of course, but new friends appeared too, drawn not by curiosity, but by authenticity. Even my family grew in unexpected ways. My father, after months of awkwardness, began asking questions not with judgment but with interest. One evening, while we were fixing something in the garage, he asked quietly, "When did you know it was time to stop hiding?" I looked at him, sensing the hesitation in his voice. I realized I didn't want to live my life afraid of being myself, I said. He nodded slowly, almost as if he were learning to forgive not just me, but himself, for years of misunderstanding. At home, moments of vulnerability became part of everyday life. My sister, always supportive, would leave little notes for me, reminders that softness is strength, that courage is in showing who you are. My mother, too, began to notice the change. She commented on how my laughter seemed lighter, how my presence brought a calm energy into rooms where tension used to linger. Acceptance, I learned, isn't always dramatic. Often, it's quiet, persistent, and deeply moving. One weekend, I decided to take a short trip alone, a retreat of sorts, to reflect on how far I'd come. I found a small cabin near a lake, surrounded by trees that whispered in the wind. The first night, I sat by the water's edge, watching the ripples in the moonlight. I thought about every fear I had faced, every tear shed in secret, every moment I had convinced myself that hiding was easier. And I realized that none of those moments were wasted. Each had shaped the resilience I now carried. In that quiet, I made a decision: I would continue to share my story. Not for fame, not for validation, but for connection. For the people who were still afraid, still hiding, still doubting their worth. For them, I would speak, write, and create spaces where truth was welcomed and celebrated. And I knew I would keep learning. Identity, after all, is not a fixed point. It's a journey, sometimes smooth, sometimes rocky, and the courage to travel it openly is what defines the path. Returning home, I carried that clarity into everyday life. Simple acts became profound: choosing an outfit that felt right, speaking up in meetings, answering messages from strangers who needed encouragement, holding my father's hand in moments of understanding, hugging Lena in gratitude for her unwavering support. Each action, small on the surface, was a testament to the freedom I had fought so hard to earn. Even now, when the world feels uncertain, I return to that first bathroom mirror, the one that witnessed my secret awakenings. I trace the familiar edges with my fingertips and smile at the reflection. It is the same face I hid for so long, yet everything has changed. There is strength in softness, courage in vulnerability, and beauty in being fully, unapologetically yourself. I embrace my sissy side not as a label, but as a symbol of truth, resilience, and love for myself and for anyone who struggles to be seen. And every day, as I step into the world, I carry that freedom with me, knowing that living authentically is the most radical and rewarding choice I could ever make. Because in the end, embracing all of me, the parts one feared, the parts one loved, wasn't just a decision. It was the beginning of a life worth living, a story worth sharing, and a legacy of courage that I hope will ripple outward, touching anyone still waiting for the courage to meet themselves.